I had just turned onto Mercer Street when I realized Adrian Moretti was following me. His black sedan stayed half a block behind, never crowding me, never pretending not to be there. I tightened my grip on 3 white envelopes inside my tote and wondered what my employer thought he was about to catch me doing. I kept walking. Turning around would only tell him I was afraid, and I wasn't. Annoyed, yes. Embarrassed, maybe. But fear gave people permission to make decisions for you, and I'd spent too many years learning not to hand anyone that permission. The corner market was still open. I pushed through the glass door, nodded to Mr. Alvarez behind the register, and pulled out my list. Milk, eggs, rice, children's cold medicine, 2 cans of coffee, a prepaid grocery card. Nothing glamorous, nothing illegal. Still, when I glanced toward the front window, the sedan had stopped across the street. Of course it had. I'd worked in Adrian Moretti's Manhattan townhouse for 11 months through his residence management company. Most days I saw him for less than 5 minutes. He left rooms quieter than he found them. Staff straightened when he entered. Contractors returned calls before his assistant finished leaving messages. Once I'd watched a property manager argue over a repair estimate until Adrian said, very calmly, "Fix it correctly." The argument ended. That was how his power worked. No shouting. No spectacle. Just consequences everyone seemed to understand before I did. I paid $68.42 for the groceries and slid the receipt into the small notebook I carried everywhere. Mr. Alvarez glanced at the bags. Mrs. Donnelly again? And the Parkers. You know they have programs for this. I know. I didn't tell him programs had forms, waiting periods, qualification limits, and people deciding whether your emergency counted enough. Cash didn't ask questions. Outside, I carried the bags 3 blocks to a narrow brick building above a laundromat. Mrs. Donnelly opened her door wearing slippers and an expression that immediately irritated me. Not because she was unhappy, because she looked grateful. "Claire, honey, you can't keep. I can keep buying groceries. You need your money too." I bought myself dinner. She looked inside the market bag. "You bought crackers. Crackers are dinner if you're creative." That earned the laugh I'd wanted. I set the bags on her kitchen counter before she could press money back into my hand. The last time she tried, I'd left it beneath her sugar bowl. Tonight I didn't stay. The Parkers were next. By the time I reached their apartment, 1 envelope was gone from my tote and another was folded around a utility payment stub. Mrs. Parker opened the door only 6 inches. "You shouldn't be here this late. Neither should overdue notices." She sighed. I handed her the envelope. Her fingers stopped halfway toward it. "They already paid this." "Who?" "The Moretti relief people. At least that's what the letter said." I didn't move. Behind her, a television played softly. Somewhere upstairs, a washing machine thumped against an uneven floor. "What letter?" She disappeared for a moment and returned with a folded notice. I read it twice. Moretti Workers Relief Fund. Assistance approved. Payment disbursed. 3 weeks earlier. I looked at the shutoff notice still taped beside her door. That money never came? Not a dollar. My stomach tightened. Mrs. Donnelly had said something similar last month. I'd assumed paperwork had gotten delayed. 2 families could be bad luck. 3 became a pattern. I opened my notebook and wrote down the date, amount, and reference number from Mrs. Parker's letter. When I stepped back onto the sidewalk, Adrian was standing beside his sedan. He hadn't approached the building, hadn't sent anyone after me. He simply waited beneath the pharmacy sign across the street, hands in his coat pockets, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. For 1 uncomfortable second, neither of us spoke. Then his gaze dropped to the grocery receipt sticking out of my notebook. Not to my face. Not to the building. To the numbers. I closed the cover. "You followed me." "Yes." No excuse. That surprised me more than a denial would have. I stepped toward him. "If you're going to fire me, do it tomorrow. I'm busy tonight." Something changed in his expression. Not anger. Calculation. "Claire," he said quietly, "how many people have you been paying for?" I should have walked away. Instead, I looked back at Mrs. Parker's building and made a decision that would pull both of us into something neither of us understood yet. "That's not the question." I held up the relief letter. The question is why your company says it already paid them. I expected him to defend the letter. Instead, Adrian took it from my hand, read every line without interrupting me, then looked back at the apartment building. Mrs. Parker, he said not loudly, would you mind telling me one thing? She stepped into the hallway, still holding her utility notice. Did anyone from Moretti Relief contact you after this letter arrived? She shook her head. No phone call. No check. Nothing. He handed the paper back to me instead of keeping it. Thank you. That was all. No promises. No polished apology. No attempt to explain away what we'd both just seen. He simply nodded to Mrs. Parker and stepped aside so she could close her door. When the hallway light clicked off, the street felt strangely quiet. I don't discuss work outside work, I said. I know. Then why are you still here? Because if that letter is authentic, either someone made a serious mistake, he paused, choosing the words carefully, or someone wants me to believe money reached people it never reached. I folded my notebook shut. And which answer do you want? The true one. His reply came too quickly to sound rehearsed. A city bus rolled past us, its headlights briefly washing over the pharmacy windows before disappearing around the corner. I followed you once, he continued. I won't do it again. You expect me to believe that? I expect you to notice whether I keep my word. That wasn't an argument. It was a challenge built on future actions instead of present excuses. I wasn't ready to trust it. I should go. He stepped back immediately, leaving the sidewalk clear. Another small surprise. People with influence usually occupied space as if everyone else should adjust around them. Adrian moved first. I walked away. Not because he'd dismissed me, because he'd made it possible. The subway ride home should have settled my thoughts. Instead, I kept seeing Mrs. Parker's relief letter. Approved. Disbursed. Those words carried weight. Someone had typed them. Someone had signed off on them. Someone expected families like hers to disappear into paperwork. When I reached my apartment, I spread my notebook across the kitchen table beside every receipt I'd saved over the past 8 months. I wasn't obsessive. I was organized. There was a difference. Each grocery purchase matched a name. Each utility payment matched an address. I never gave cash without keeping proof of where it went. Around midnight I noticed something I hadn't before. 3 families. 3 approval letters. 3 different dates. 1 identical authorization code format. Not the numbers themselves. The structure. The same pattern. I circled each one in blue ink. The next morning I arrived at the townhouse 10 minutes early. Routine mattered. Whatever happened on Mercer Street belonged outside these walls. By 8 o'clock the breakfast dishes were washed, fresh flowers replaced, and the library shelves dusted. Mrs. Green, the house manager, handed me the day's assignment list. You're in the West office this afternoon. I almost never cleaned Adrian's private office while he was there. Today apparently I would. When I entered after lunch, he stood near the windows reviewing a stack of financial reports. He looked up only long enough to acknowledge me. Miss Bennett. Mr. Moretti. Nothing about his tone suggested last night's conversation had happened. I appreciated that. Professional meant predictable. Predictable meant safe. I emptied the wastebasket, dusted the shelves, and wiped fingerprints from the conference table. Not once did he interrupt. Halfway through polishing the credenza, he spoke without looking away from the papers. I reviewed every payment issued to the Parker family. The cloth stopped moving in my hand. There weren't any. I turned slowly. He laid one document on the table between us. No payment was ever authorized. I frowned. But the letter doesn't match our records. He wasn't accusing me. If anything, he sounded disturbed. I need to ask you something. I waited. How many letters like that have you seen? For the first time since we'd met, the answer I gave him would determine more than what happened next. It would decide whether I let him into a problem I had always handled alone. 3. The word stayed between us. Adrian didn't move. I set my polishing cloth down. Mrs. Donnelly, the Parkers, and a former warehouse worker named Harold Price. He picked up his phone. Send me every relief fund disbursement from the last 6 months. Recipient, approval date, authorization code, payment method. A voice answered through the speaker. That'll take until tomorrow. Make it noon. Yes, sir. He ended the call. No raised voice. No threat. Just a deadline that apparently rearranged someone else's day. Wait. His attention shifted to me. If you pull every recipient at once, people are going to notice. That's the point. No. Your point is finding the problem. Mine is not making families feel like suspects. His jaw tightened slightly. I expected him to tell me how his company worked. Instead, he asked, "What would you do?" That question changed the room. I walked toward the table and pointed to the report he'd shown me. Start with the 3 names I know. Compare dates, amounts, and authorization formats. Quietly. If they match something larger, then widen it. He studied the page. You're asking me to slow down. I'm asking you not to scare people who already think asking for help comes with consequences. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he called the same number again. Change of scope. 3 files only. Parker Donnelly Price. No recipient contact without my approval. A pause. Yes, sir. He hung up. That was the first time I saw what restraint cost him. Not obedience from other people. Resisting his own instinct to take control. I finished the office and returned to my regular assignments, but the day refused to feel regular. By 4, Adrian's assistant brought a sealed folder into the library. She placed it beside him and left without questioning why I was still in the room. Adrian opened it. I stayed where I was. This is company information, I said. You already have information my company doesn't. That wasn't permission exactly. It was recognition. He turned the first page toward me. Mrs. Donnelly's file showed no payment. Neither did Harold Price's. Same as the Parkers. But each file contained a scanned approval notice. I leaned closer. They all look legitimate. They are legitimate forms. Then why aren't the payments there? That's what I'm trying to determine. I pulled my notebook from my apron pocket and opened to the 3 reference numbers I'd copied. Adrian compared them against the forms. Then his finger stopped. Here. Each authorization number was different. But the final 4-character sequence repeated in the same position. K7-14. My stomach tightened. That means something. It means these weren't generated randomly. He reached for his phone again. I stopped him with one sentence. Before you call anyone, tell me who can create those codes. His hand remained above the screen. Finance administration. How many people? A small number. And if one of them is involved? He lowered the phone. That answer was enough. The problem wasn't missing paperwork anymore. Someone with access had created documents convincing struggling families that help had been sent when it hadn't. Adrian closed the folder. From now on, don't give anyone copies of your receipts. I wasn't planning to. Not even someone from my company. That made me look at him differently. Yesterday, I thought I was showing him a failure beneath his name. Now he was warning me that the person responsible might be standing somewhere inside it. I kept my notebook closed for the rest of the afternoon. Not hidden. Just closed. There was a difference. Adrian didn't ask to see it again. That mattered more than I wanted it to. The next morning he had 3 folders waiting on the library table. No assistants. No extra staff. No one hovering near the door. You said no recipient contact, he told me. There hasn't been any. I set my tote down but stayed standing. And no copies leave this room. Agreed. No names go to anyone who doesn't already have legal access. Agreed. And if I say something in my notebook is personal, you don't get to decide otherwise because you own the building. His mouth almost moved. Not a smile. Something quieter. Agreed. I sat. That was the first time I chose to help him. Not because he had authority. Because he had accepted limits on it. We worked through the 3 cases one line at a time. My receipts showed what I had actually paid. His internal files showed what the relief fund claimed had been processed. The gaps weren't identical, but the pattern was. Approval entered. Payment listed. Recipient never received it. I tapped one page. Who reconciles these? Finance administration. That's broad. It won't stay broad. He reached for his phone. I gave him a look. He stopped. What? You promised quiet. I can ask one question quietly. Can the person you ask see that you're asking? He leaned back. That answer was yes. For a man who seemed able to move people with a sentence, Adrian Moretti was surprisingly willing to reconsider a decision when I challenged it. He opened another report instead. Fine. We follow the records. The authorization strings from all 3 files carried the same 4-character sequence. K7-14. I had copied it into my notebook the night before. Adrian searched older approved relief cases. There it was again. Then again. Not on every file. Only on payments routed through one reconciliation office. My pulse picked up. So that code identifies the office? Or the processing path? Which means the missing money didn't disappear randomly. No, his voice changed on that word. Not louder. Colder. But this time the cold wasn't directed at me. It was directed inward. At his own system. For the first time I understood that Adrian's control wasn't confidence. Not entirely. It was how he kept uncertainty from getting close enough to hurt him. And now uncertainty was sitting 3 feet away in my handwriting. A soft knock came at the library door. A man in a navy suit stepped in, handed Adrian a slim folder and left. Adrian opened it. His expression hardened. What? He turned the page toward me. At the top was the name Victor Kane, Chief Financial Officer. Beneath it was a short internal note recommending that any irregularities involving relief fund disbursements be resolved quietly to avoid unnecessary reputational exposure. Is that normal? I asked. For Victor. Adrian said. Yes. That should have reassured me. It didn't. Because one line farther down, the memo referenced K7-14. Adrian read it twice. Then his phone rang. He checked the screen and answered. Victor. I watched his face while the other man spoke. Adrian's gaze shifted to my notebook. No, he said. She hasn't given me copies. My fingers tightened around the cover. Another pause. Then Adrian's voice went very still. She won't be giving them to you either. He ended the call. I stared at him. What exactly did he ask for? Before Adrian could answer, my own phone buzzed inside my tote. A new email. Moretti Finance Administration. Formal request for all personal records related to company relief recipients. I looked from the screen to Adrian. Someone inside his company knew exactly what I had. And they wanted it before we understood why. I read the email twice before looking up. Adrian had already reached for his phone. Don't. His hand stopped. The room went still around us. I turned the screen toward him. If you call Victor right now, he'll know this scared us. It should concern you. It does. That's different. Adrian studied me for a second, then lowered the phone. Another choice. Another piece of control he didn't take. I opened my notebook. Not the whole thing. Just the pages tied to Mrs. Donnelly, Harold Price, and the Parkers. If they want these records, then the records matter. Yes. So we don't hand them over. No. And we don't hide them in your office either. His expression sharpened. Claire, you said someone inside your company could be involved. That means your office isn't automatically safer, just because it belongs to you. Most people probably didn't say things like that to Adrian Moretti. I did. Because being careful around power was useless if you became afraid to tell it the truth. He looked toward the folders on the table. Then back at me. You're right. That surprised me enough that I almost missed what came next. I'll have legal make independent copies. No, his jaw tightened. You have another objection? I have a condition. I pulled the 3 receipts free from my notebook. These stay with me until I know exactly who gets access. Claire, if those documents connect to internal fraud, they're mine. His mouth closed. They were paid with my money. Collected by me. Recorded by me. You don't get ownership because they became useful. The silence lasted several seconds. Then he nodded once. Your records stay yours. Something in my chest loosened. Not trust. Not yet. But room for it. A knock sounded at the library door. Adrian's assistant stepped in. Mr. Moretti, Victor Kane is asking for 10 minutes. Adrian's gaze never left mine. Send him in. I stood. I should go. Stay. My shoulders stiffened. He corrected himself immediately. If you want to. That mattered too. I stayed. Victor Kane entered carrying no folder, no laptop, nothing that made him look like a man connected to missing money. Early 50s. Silver at the temples. Calm voice. He nodded politely to me. Miss Bennett. I didn't remember ever meeting him. That was the first thing I noticed. The second was that he knew my name. I understand there's been confusion regarding relief fund documentation. 3 families didn't receive approved assistance, Adrian said. Victor sighed. Administrative error. Unfortunate but fixable. How? We reimburse the amounts immediately, correct the records, and spare everyone unnecessary disruption. I watched Adrian. He didn't answer. Victor continued. No need for auditors. No need to alarm employees. No need to turn a processing problem into a public scandal. Then he looked at me. We can reimburse Miss Bennett as well. There it was. Not a threat. A solution. Clean. Efficient. Almost generous. And completely wrong. You want to pay me back? I asked. For what you covered personally. And then what? Victor blinked. The families are made whole. No. The numbers are made neat. His polite expression cooled by half a degree. I placed my notebook on the table. If someone took money meant for those families, reimbursement doesn't answer who did it. Adrian spoke quietly. It protects the company while we investigate internally. I turned toward him. The words hit harder because I understood them. He was considering it. Not because he didn't care. Because this was how he solved things. Contain the damage. Control the variables. Protect the structure. I slid the notebook back into my tote. If that's what you do, I'm done helping. Victor looked almost relieved. Adrian didn't. Claire. No, my voice stayed steady. You don't get to use my records to make this disappear politely. The room seemed to narrow around us. I could have walked away. Instead, I made the decision. If you want my documentation, start an independent audit. Victor spoke first. That would freeze active relief accounts. Then fix the system. Adrian looked at him, then at me. The pause felt expensive. Finally, he picked up the phone. Freeze the relief fund accounts. Effective immediately. Bring in outside auditors. Victor's face changed. For the first time, he looked afraid of the paperwork. Adrian ended the call. The old arrangement was gone. So was mine. Because now my notebook wasn't just evidence I controlled. It was the reason Adrian Moretti had opened his own company to scrutiny. By noon the next day, the Relief Fund website carried a plain notice. Temporarily suspended pending independent review. No logo flourish. No explanation. Just a sentence that meant families who already had too little now had even less certainty. I stood in Adrian's kitchen staring at the notice on my phone until the screen dimmed. You knew this would happen, I said. He was across the room, jacket off, sleeves rolled once at the wrist, speaking quietly to someone from his legal team. He ended the call. I knew the accounts would freeze. That's not what I asked. He understood. His gaze moved toward my tote, where the notebook rested inside. You mean the families? Yes. He exhaled through his nose. I'm covering emergency cases personally until the audit is complete. My first reaction was anger. My second was worse. Relief. Because Mrs. Donnelly's prescriptions wouldn't wait for accounting procedures. The Parkers couldn't tell the utility company to come back after outside counsel finished reviewing 6 months of records. How? Through an independent nonprofit. Your name on it? No conditions. No, that answer came without defensiveness. I hated that it made things harder. He had listened. He had learned something. And I still didn't know whether I trusted what he would do when learning costs more than money. That afternoon, I brought copies of my 3 receipt pages to the outside auditors myself. Not originals. Adrian didn't ask for them. He arranged a conference room for the meeting, then stayed outside because I told him I wanted to speak without anyone from Moretti present. Another boundary respected. Another reason not to simplify him. When I came out, he was waiting near the elevator. They found something, I said. His expression changed. Already. The 3 payments weren't isolated. He pressed the elevator button. How many? They wouldn't tell me. Good. I looked at him. Good. They shouldn't disclose findings to someone outside the audit team. That was the right answer. We rode downstairs in silence. Then, in the lobby, one of the auditors caught up with us. Mr. Moretti. Adrian turned. There's an issue with the authorization trail. I started to step away. The auditor stopped me. Ms. Bennett, this concerns the records you provided. She handed Adrian a single-page summary. I watched him read it. His face didn't move. That was how I knew something had. What? I asked. He gave me the page. The disputed relief fund entries all passed through the same reconciliation office. That part we already knew. What we hadn't known was that the same office had also processed adjustments on several Moretti construction contracts. Larger amounts. Different accounts. Same pattern. K7-14. The code I'd first noticed in 3/8 letters wasn't a strange little clerical marker anymore. It was a trail. And it went far beyond Mrs. Parker's heating bill. I looked at Adrian. You knew there were problems with those contracts? No, the auditor shifted slightly. Not enough to interrupt. Enough to make me notice. I turned to her. What? She looked at Adrian instead. He went very still. Tell her. The auditor hesitated. Mr. Moretti signed the quarterly oversight certification on those accounts. The paper suddenly felt heavier. I read the line twice. Adrian Moretti, Executive Certification. You signed off on this? Yes. You said you didn't know. I didn't. That doesn't make it better. No, he didn't reach for the page. Didn't tell me what executives signed or how many layers existed below him. He simply stood there and accepted the fact that his name was on something he had not understood. That should have helped. It didn't. Because one of my first assumptions about Adrian had been that nothing carrying his name escaped his attention. Now I had proof that something had. And people had paid for it. I folded the summary carefully. I'm taking my records to the auditors directly from now on. His jaw tightened. All right. No copies through your office. No private review first. Nothing filtered. All right. Staying involved meant continuing beside a man whose system had failed people. Walking away meant leaving those same people without the records I had gathered. Neither choice felt clean. So I chose the one that cost me less self-respect. I'll stay with the audit, I said. But not with you. For the first time since Mercer Street, Adrian had no answer. The elevator doors opened behind me. I stepped inside alone, carrying the notebook he had once followed me to understand. Now it was the reason I no longer trusted him to stand between the truth and everyone else. The next 3 days proved that absence could be louder than an argument. Adrian didn't call. He didn't send a car. He didn't ask Mrs. Green where I went after work or whether I planned to return. At the townhouse, my schedule changed without explanation. His private office disappeared from my assignment sheet. Not punishment. Distance. Exactly what I had asked for. I hated how much it hurt. The audit kept moving. I met the outside team in rented conference rooms downtown, handed over copies of receipts, and answered questions about dates, names, and amounts. Every time they asked whether Adrian had instructed me to keep anything private, I gave the same answer. No, that should have made things easier. Instead, it complicated the story I had built around him. My whole life, powerful people had taught me the same lesson. Help came with strings. Protection became leverage. Generosity became a receipt someone collected later. Adrian had followed me without permission. He had signed papers he hadn't understood. He had almost chosen containment over exposure. Those facts remained true. But so did another one. After I walked away, he let me. On Thursday afternoon, an auditor named Elaine placed a new document beside my notebook. This affects the emergency relief accounts. I read it carefully. Payroll reserve transfer. Personal funds. No more Eddie branding. No repayment clause. No publicity authorization. Adrian had moved enough money to keep temporary assistance running while the audit froze everything else. He told me this was going through an independent nonprofit. I said. It is. Then why is his name here? Because he personally guaranteed the bridge funding. I looked up. What does that mean? If the company can't recover the funds, he absorbs the loss. I stared at the signature. Same handwriting as the certification that had damaged my trust. This signature meant something different. One had been careless. This one was deliberate. He could have announced this. Elaine gave me a dry look. He specifically prohibited the communications team from using it. Something inside me shifted. Not forgiveness. That would have been too easy. But one of my beliefs cracked. Maybe not every act of generosity was a future claim. Maybe sometimes a person could give and deliberately remove the mechanism that let them own the gratitude. I closed the file. Is there anything else? Elaine hesitated. There is. She pulled another sheet from the folder. Victor Kane had submitted a preliminary explanation for the irregularities. According to him, lower-level finance administrators had mishandled reconciliation codes. 3 names were listed. I recognized one. Maria Benson. She had processed Mrs. Parker's application. The name pulled at my memory. I opened my notebook and searched backward through the entries until I found it. M. Benson called 4/12. Says system shows paid. She can't locate transfer confirmation. I read the note again. She questioned the payment before any of us knew there was a pattern. Elaine leaned closer. That matters. My own handwriting. Evidence recorded before Adrian followed me. Before the audit. Before anyone knew those records mattered. If Victor's explanation stood, Maria and 2 others could lose their jobs and carry blame for something the documents suggested they had questioned themselves. I thought about leaving the rest to the auditors. That would have been safer. Cleaner. It would also have made me exactly the person I never wanted power to turn me into. Someone who protected her own peace while another person paid the price. I pushed the notebook across the table. Copy that page. Elaine looked at me. You're sure? That note connected more of my private records to the investigation. It meant surrendering another piece of the independence I guarded like armor. No, I said. Then I kept my hand on the notebook. But do it anyway. As the copier started behind the glass wall, Elaine's phone buzzed. She read the message and looked at me differently. What? Mr. Moretti just rejected Victor Kane's internal settlement proposal. My pulse slowed. Meaning? He instructed counsel to preserve every record and prepare for external disclosure if the audit confirms deliberate fraud. I looked down at Adrian's signature again. For the first time since I stepped into that elevator alone, I understood what his silence might actually mean. He wasn't trying to win me back. He was preparing to lose something bigger. The next morning, Elaine called before I reached the townhouse. Come downtown. That was all she said. By the time I entered the conference room, Adrian was already there. He stood at the far end of the table, not beside my chair. Distance again. Chosen, not imposed. Elaine slid 3 folders toward us. Your receipts close the gap. I sat. The first folder held Mrs. Parker's records. Officially, assistance approved and paid. Actually, no transfer ever left the relief fund account. The second showed Mrs. Donnelly. Same result. Then Harold Price. Again. My notebook entries sat beside each file. Dates. Amounts. Reference numbers. What I had paid because their supposed assistance never arrived. Elaine turned to the audit trail. Every false payment carried the same processing path. K7-14. The code I had circled in blue ink at my kitchen table. It wasn't an office marker. It was an override route. Who had access? I asked. Elaine looked at Adrian. He answered. Victor. My stomach sank. Only Victor? One of 3 executives. But only one used K7-14 on every disputed entry. Elaine placed Victor's authorization history beside the records. There it was. His credentials. Again and again. Not just relief payments. Contract adjustments. Vendor reconciliations. Amounts too large to dismiss as clerical mistakes. The truth arrived in pieces, and each piece made the last one worse. Victor hadn't simply hidden missing aid. He had diverted money through accounts Adrian's companies trusted, then used false relief fund records to make vulnerable families look fully assisted. And every time the system failed them, I had quietly covered part of the damage with my own paycheck. I looked at Adrian. He said nothing. That hurt more than any defense would have. Because I finally understood the thing he had been facing since part 6. Victor had done this, but Adrian's signature had given the system credibility. You certified these accounts, I said. Yes. You trusted him. Yes. And no one checked behind him. Not closely enough. No excuse. No attempt to shrink the truth. My false belief broke first. Power did not mean seeing everything. Sometimes power created blind spots because everyone assumed someone else had already checked. Then Adrian's broke too. Control had not protected him from betrayal. It had helped hide it. Elaine pushed one final document forward. Not new evidence. A release authorization. If Mr. Moretti signs this, she said, the full archive goes to outside regulators and independent counsel. I understood immediately. Victor would be exposed. So would Adrian. The oversight certifications. The failures. Every place his name had stood above a system he had not truly examined. Adrian picked up the pen. I watched his hand pause over the signature line. This will damage your companies, I said. Yes. Your reputation. Yes. And people who had nothing to do with Victor may lose contracts. His jaw tightened. That's the part one hate. There it was. The final price. Not money. Not embarrassment. The possibility that telling the truth would hurt innocent people too. I reached for my notebook and opened to Maria Benson's note. Then protect them with the truth too. He looked at me. Release the records that show who questioned the payments. Don't let Victor spread the blame downward. Adrian nodded. Then he signed. One decision. No spectacle. Elaine took the authorization and left the room to begin the disclosure. Adrian remained standing. So did I. For the first time, nothing separated us except what came next. And neither of us could control that part anymore. For a few seconds after Elaine left, neither Adrian nor I moved. Then I opened my notebook. Not to the receipts. To a blank page. What are you doing? He asked. Making sure we don't rebuild the same problem with cleaner paperwork. He came around the table but stopped across from me. I wrote 3 words. Independent Worker Trust. The relief fund can't report through one executive anymore, I said. Not Victor. Not you. Adrian looked at the page. Agreed. Recipients get representation. Agreed. Outside audits stay permanent. Another pause. Then, agreed. That one cost him more. I could tell. Control had always been his answer to uncertainty. Now I was asking him to build a system that limited his own authority. I pushed the notebook toward him. Your turn. He didn't take the pen. You designed it. I started it. That's different. I looked at him. He gestured toward the blank space beneath my notes. You decide what happens to the people who were failed. For once, Adrian Moretti wasn't offering me money. He was giving up the right to decide. I wrote again. Emergency payments first. Then restitution. Then independent review before any Moretti executive could approve or deny assistance alone. By late afternoon, the framework sat beside the same notebook Adrian had once followed me through Mercer Street to understand. Elaine returned with confirmation that the archive had been transferred outside the company. Victor was removed from financial authority pending investigation. Maria Benson and the other lower-level employees were cleared from the disputed approvals because the audit records showed they had raised concerns instead of causing them. That mattered most. People who had questioned the system would not become the system's sacrifice. Adrian read the confirmation once. Then he signed another document. This one surrendered his unilateral control over the rebuilt relief program. I watched his name appear at the bottom. Same handwriting. 3 different meanings. The first signature had represented neglect. The second, accountability. This one meant restraint. You understand you could keep final approval, I said. I understand why I shouldn't. That answer settled somewhere inside me. Not because it erased what had happened, because it didn't try to. The company would still face scrutiny. Contracts could still disappear. Adrian's reputation would not return to what it had been before the audit. Consequences remained. So did choice. I closed my notebook. There's one more thing. He waited. I'm not staying at the townhouse. His expression tightened, but he didn't interrupt. I'll finish my notice properly. After that, I need work that doesn't depend on you. He nodded once. If that's what you want. It is. The old fear rose automatically. Accept help, owe something. Stand near power, lose part of yourself. But Adrian had just placed limits around his own power because I asked him to. Maybe trust wasn't surrender. Maybe it was choosing after someone proved they could hear no. I picked up my tote. He stepped aside, leaving the door clear. I smiled. Dinner Friday? For the first time all day, he looked genuinely surprised. Dinner. 2 people. Public restaurant. Separate checks if that makes you feel better. A quiet laugh escaped him. I think that's supposed to make you feel better. It does. Then yes. I walked out because I wanted to, and for the first time I knew I could come back for the same reason. Power had once followed me down a dark street. In the end, the only power that mattered was the kind willing to walk beside someone without deciding their path.